Welcome back. This time we're taking another look at Avengers Infinity War. This time with the spoiler filters taken off. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, I recommend you stop this video now because there's going to be nothing from spoilers from here on in. Now, you can check out my spoiler-free video on my channel. I'll have a link down in the description below. But if you have seen the movie or you just really don't care about spoilers, feel free to sit back and join me on this discussion of Avengers Infinity War. The third Avengers film, the 19th overall installment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and a really, really enjoyable movie. There was a lot riding on this film. They've been basically setting this up, as far as we know, since the original Avengers, when we first got a glimpse of Thanos in the mid-credits sequence. And they've just been doling out more and more information. It wasn't until the post-credit sequence of Thor Dark World that we first heard the phrase Infinity Stones. And then, of course, Guardians of the Galaxy gave us the background of those, and that and pretty much confirmed that Thanos was trying to collect them all. And then after Age of Ultron, he declared that he was going to do it himself after using various underlings and third parties, such as Loki, to gather them for him. And that brings us to Infinity War. This is, again, the 19th film in the MCU. It's been 10 years since Iron Man started it all. And more or less, it's all been building up to this film. And they pretty much hit a home run as far as I'm concerned. If you see my spoiler-free video, you know I did have some issues, and I will be getting to those as we reach those points in the discussion. But I do feel like I spent a bit more time talking about the issues I had rather than the things I really enjoyed. And that was mostly because the things I enjoyed, I didn't want to spoil. And you really couldn't discuss without spoiling those aspects. I will say, just getting it out there right now, when they announced that Avengers 3 and 4 were no longer going to be Infinity War Part 1 and Part 2, I really thought they were going to be wrapping up more or less the Infinity War story with this film. I was not expecting the massive cliffhanger that we got. Now, obviously, it makes sense that Avengers 4 is not called Infinity War Part 2 because the Infinity War is essentially over. Thanos won. And what a great villain Thanos is. This is really his movie. The Avengers are just there to get in his way. This is one of the best villains of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. And obviously they have had a deserved reputation of not always having the best villains. Of course, we had Loki, we've had others. But for the most part, they have not had the best villains. Thanos is definitely a great villain, and we get that from the very opening scene. They establish him as the villain to fear in that very opening scene. And I'm going to try to keep most of my discussion in this video more or less chronological to the film. We're going to be jumping around as I think of things and looking at my notes and such. But for the most part, we're going to go chronological. So let's start at the very, very beginning. Of course, we open with the extended Marvel logo, but instead of the bombastic, energetic Avengers theme, it starts with this very somber, soft music. And let me say right now, the music throughout this film was phenomenal. And this is just the first example of that. And then over that, the logo hasn't even finished forming, and we're hearing the voiceover of the Asgardian refugee ship. This is picking up immediately after the mid-credit sequence in Thor Ragnarok, where we see Thanos' ship attacking this refugee ship. And there's been some questions I've seen on exactly what happens to the Asgardians in this scene. I've seen the film twice now, and it does appear that they slice the ship in half. Because Thor does say later on that Thanos killed half of his people. So the other half are apparently still there, or are still alive. Their fate and exactly what happens to them is not revealed in this movie. But the side of the ship that we do see, pretty much everyone is dead except for Thor, Loki, and Heimdall. And this is where we see Thanos, we see his underlings. Ebony Maw is pretty much the only one that I know by name at this point. And he's doing his little spiel about how they're so lucky to be killed by Thanos, blah, blah, blah. And Loki is doing his Loki type things, and he gets a great callback line from the original Avengers movie where he gets to say, "We have a Hulk." And the Hulk gets beat down. I mean, when Thanos hits him in the side of the neck, I mean, you hear the impact. You hear crunching sounds, and you hear Thor almost yelp. I was gonna almost say like whimper, but he yelps. I mean, he is in pain. We have not seen that before, and I do believe that's why he does not come back in the rest of this film. He is afraid for the first time in his life. The Hulk is afraid, and nothing Bruce can say can bring him back. But Heimdall helps the Hulk escape. Unfortunately, he is killed, which is really kind of sad because, with the exception of the new characters introduced in Thor Ragnarok, and then with the subsequent death of Loki, pretty much all of the secondary characters from Thor's life are gone, with the exception of Jane and Darcy, and they have a 50-50 shot of still being around at this point. But yeah, we lost the Warriors 3. I guess the Lady Sith is out there still somewhere. Again, she has a 50-50 shot of still being around. But Loki does have his moment to shine. I really didn't see him going evil again. I mean, he's oscillated back and forth so many times over these films. I really just didn't see him going that route again. I really felt that he was lying when he was pledging his allegiance to Thanos. And it was interesting when he was pledging his allegiance, he referred to himself as not Asgardian. And then when he was making his attack, he referred to himself as Odin's son. I think it was a nice place for him to be if this was truly the end of Loki, and I do believe this was the end of Loki. And he does get that one last little verbal barb to Thanos. No matter how strong he is, no matter how many Infinity Stones he gets, no matter how he uses that power, he'll never be a god. That was a great, just one zinger right there before he's over. And, I mean, oh my god, I mean, it's brutal. I mean, we see Heimdall dead, there's dead bodies everywhere. Loki gets strangled and neck broken and tossed on the ground like cordwood. I mean, it's, holy crap, that's how you start a movie. And that's, again, how you introduce this villain of Thanos. This is not your, everyday villain. This is someone who just beat down relatively easily, up until now, one of the strongest characters we've ever seen. And the other strongest character is Thor. And he'd already been beat down before we even got to see anything. So this is a villain we need to fear. This is a villain that is head and shoulders above anything we've seen before. And this opening scene does that so well, setting it up. The ship is destroyed, Thor is lost in space, and we go to New York, and we get a hilarious scene with Doctor Strange and Wong, and the Hulk crashes through their roof, which ultimately leads to Tony showing up. Before that, we do get the finally we get the title screen, Avengers Infinity War. And all of the interactions with Tony and Doctor Strange are hilarious. That whole fight sequence between Ebony Maw and Tony and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and not the Hulk. There was just some great one-liners there, hilarious things. Dude, you're embarrassing me in front of the wizards. Spider-Man was Spider-Man. This was just such a great scene. Adds a little bit of levity after just how dark the film opens. And I'll go ahead and get it out of the way. This was a great, good first example of many times where they were able to balance the various tones in this movie. There's very dark moments, very somber moments, and moments of great levity. And it never felt like an emotional whiplash, where it's so jarring. Because even the scene with Doctor Strange and Wong joking about him not having any money to go get a sandwich, this is coming off right after we saw Loki get killed, Heimdall get killed, but it didn't feel out of place. It always worked for me. So the tonal shifts they handled beautifully, which is just as important as juggling all of these characters, which again I felt they did very well. Some characters I don't think got as much screen time as I would have liked, and for the most part those are the ones that are still around at the end, so it makes sense retroactively that they gave time to the characters who either were going to die or possibly die, or did die, but whether or not the final moments of the film get reversed or not, we'll talk about that when we get to speculations. But ultimately this leads to Tony leaving the Earth along with Spider-Man and a captured Doctor Strange. He gets one phone call with Pepper, and they're really setting up Tony to die in this movie. They set up Hawkeye in Age of Ultron. He's pushing all the buttons story-wise. He's the one that we're going to lose. And they're really setting that up with Tony here, between his dream of having a kid with Pepper, the upcoming wedding, that last phone call, and they really have a great payoff twice with that. Once when Tony is stabbed and we think he may die there, and then later when he loses Spider-Man and has to watch him die in front of him. My God, I don't want to know Tony's state of mind, especially if he gets back to Earth and finds out that Pepper's gone. He is going to have some issues to deal with. But in any event, that sets up that with Bruce having to call Captain America on the flip phone that we saw at the end of Civil War, to warn him and get things underway, because as he puts it, the Beatles broke up while he was fighting in an arena in outer space. Moving on to Scotland, we have Vision and Scarlet Witch sneaking some time together. This is where it is confirmed that it has been 2 years since Civil War, because Vision talks about how they've been sneaking these moments away for 2 years, and they see the news footage of what happened in New York, and then Vision gets stabbed in the back. Holy crap. And we have this whole fight. And between losing Heimdall and Loki in the opening scene, all the chaos of the New York scene, and then this fight with it starting with Vision getting stabbed in the back. This is really where it felt like pretty much anyone could die at any moment. I really thought that Scarlet Witch was going to die in this scene. Every time there was a cutaway, or the camera shot angle was such that we could see the front of her, like maybe shoulder up, but not from behind. I was just waiting for her to get stabbed like Vision did, and she obviously would not have fared as well as he did. I just really felt like there was a good chance of her dying. And that was something that I really felt throughout this movie. There was this palpable sense of dread that anyone could die at any time. Up until the end, we lost Gamora, we lost Vision. Up until the end, which I consider something that is potentially and probably going to be reversed in some form. Those were the only two that died, but still, we have... I believed it in the moment, and that is where the movie succeeded. As I was watching it for the first time, I really felt like anyone could die at any time. And that just shows how good they were at setting this up. Plus, the hype of this. We knew this was going to be the film. If anyone was going to die, this was the one that was going to happen in. Ultimately, we get a great reintroduction of Captain America and Black Widow and Falcon. They all regroup. They go back to the States to figure out what they're going to do next. And I think at this point is when we get introduced to the Guardians of the Galaxy. And again, we get the music, we get the one-liners. They're responding to the Asgardian distress call, hoping to get some money. All they find is a seemingly dead Thor. Some of my favorite lines from a comedic standpoint were in this scene with Drax, like, "No, you're a dude. This is the man," and it's like a pirate had a baby with an angel. Oh my God, Drax was so hilarious in this movie. Dave Bautista, his acting from the first Guardians through the second into this one has improved so much. This is the perfect character for him. But Thor wakes up. We learn a little bit about Gamora and relearn her connections with Thanos and all that. And we had some very funny banter with Peter and Rocket and Thor, and they ultimately split up with Thor going to this forge to try to get a new hammer or weapon that could potentially kill Thanos, while the rest of them go to nowhere to try to find the Collector and see if they can get the ether or the Reality Stone before Thanos does. So back on Earth, Rhodey basically blows off Ross, rejoins the rest of the Avengers. I didn't really have a huge issue with this. My friend, who is he's the guy I talk to when we talk about Avengers movies, our MCU movies and other comic book movies. One of the reasons why I was waiting on this video is he didn't get a chance to see this until as I'm filming this last night, and we had a chance to finally talk about it. He had a bit of an issue with Rhodey just like joining him back on board. But I think over the past 2 years, I think he's probably at a point where that's not as big an issue now, and he realizes the severity of the situation. But what I will say is this is, again, in my spoiler-free review, I mentioned that there was a plot point, that I really had a problem with. And I will say I didn't have as much of a problem with it the second time through, mainly because I was just able to sit back and enjoy the film for what it was, which is a lot of fun. But this is the introduction to the plot point that I did have a significant problem with. And other than my issue with some of the special effects later in the movie, really only 2 scenes. And it's funny because my friend knew exactly the 2 scenes that I was going to mention. And I'll go ahead and get that out of the way now. The special effects in this film are phenomenal, especially what they're able to do with Thanos, because Thanos is such an important character, and there's so much emotion in his character, and how, both in his dialogue, what he does, and especially how he's presented. My only real issue with the special effects is there's one scene during the Wakandan battle when Bruce opens up Hulkbuster, and we only see like the upper half of him. That was not a good scene. Then at the very end, when we see once again the upper half of him, it's essentially the last scene on Earth in the film. It looked horrible. I mean, oh my God! It was bad enough that I hope they fix it for the home video release, because it was just unconscionably bad in a film where the special effects were really, really good overall. So those are my special effects issues. My going back to my plot issue, and this is the only real issue I had with the movie from start to finish. I enjoyed it. There's some nitpicks here or there, but so Vision gets the idea that because Scarlet Witch's powers came from the same source, that using her powers they could actually destroy the Mind Stone. So that's sort of, the whole point. We all knew something was going to happen with the Mind Stone. It's in Vision. And he wants them to destroy him. Now, I can see where Cap is coming from, where he's like, we don't trade lives. I'm not going to have one of my team members kill another one of my team members just because that's the easiest way out. And I will say, at this point in the story, there's no real downside at this point. They have defeated their adversary. They have seemingly fled for a little while. They potentially have some time. This is what ultimately leads them to Wakanda because of the medical technology that Cap knows is there. Again, I don't have a huge issue with them showing up. My problem is when the entire Wakandan battle is essentially to give Shuri time to get the stone out of Vision. Once the battle starts, my problem hits, because it comes down to, a lot of it has to do with the fact that Cap used the phrase, "We do not trade lives." We're not trading Vision's life to basically win the battle. But what they end up doing is having a battle where a ton of Wakandans die. And they're trading those lives to save Vision's. Obviously, these are a bunch of extras that they don't know personally. But if you're going to use the phrase, "We don't trade lives," don't trade lives later to save Vision's. So there's an inherent discrepancy in his logic that I thought at least should have been mentioned. Where Vision says, "My life's not worth the lives of these soldiers," and maybe Black Panther says, "You know what? I'm the king. I can tell them what to do." Something. It should have at least been addressed, and it was not. So it really did actually bug me quite a bit at the beginning of the Wakandan battle that this entire battle is happening to save one life, when we're seeing many, many lives being lost. That was my one big issue with this movie. And I guess it didn't bother me as much the second time, but it was something that I did want to address, and I haven't actually seen it addressed in some of the other discussion videos that I've watched since the release. So moving on, we follow our half of the Guardians to nowhere, which we are familiar with from the original Guardians movie. And it seems deserted. And then, some really funny lines from Drax and other people, ultimately leading to Gamora fighting and seemingly killing Thanos. And this entire scene was immensely emotional. And then we hear Thanos' voice. You know it's too easy. This isn't how it's gonna go down. But then when the Reality Stone wipes across and we just see the destruction wrought around them, I mean, that was that chilling goosebumps moment. Oh my God. This ultimately leads to the showdown between Gamora, Thanos, and Peter, where Gamora had earlier requested that Peter kill him to kill her so he wouldn't get some knowledge that she has. And I like the fact that Peter actually pulled the trigger. The whole a loved one being threatened ploy was used multiple times in this movie. Thanos used it against Loki in the opening scene with Thor, and Loki backs down, gives him the Tesseract. Later on, we see the same thing with Doctor Strange, although there's an ulterior motive behind that, I believe. Then almost immediately afterwards, we have Gamora giving up the location of the Soul Stone to save Nebula. So really, of all the heroes that put into that position, Peter's the only one that actually pulled the trigger and actually earned himself some respect from Thanos. He's like, "I like you," and leaves them alive. That's probably, I believe, why he left Peter and the other Guardians alive. He's like, "You know what? I respect you." And that was an interesting aspect to Thanos' character. I mean, he is an evil despot trying to kill half the universe's population, but he has this sort of odd sense of honor that crops up at times, and this was one of them. Meanwhile, on Ebony Maw's ship, with the help of Peter's knowledge of really old movies like Aliens, they were able to get rid of Ebony Moss, save Doctor Strange, and then ultimately decide to take the ship onto Titan. Then Thor, Rocket, and Groot end up at Nidavellir. I have no idea if I pronounced that correctly. This forge of the ancient dwarfs. And brilliant casting using Peter Dinklage as a giant dwarf. He was hilarious. It was a good scene. Interesting to try to figure out exactly when all of this went down. Again, my friend and I had a pretty lengthy discussion about the gauntlet and when it could have been created. Presumably, if the dwarves had been wiped out while Odin was still around, they would have heard about it. So my belief is that the gauntlet was created sometime between the end of Thor, the Dark World, and the end of Age of Ultron, which is when we see him with the gauntlet. Now, obviously, this does introduce a plot inconsistency with the fact that there was a fake gauntlet in the Asgardian vault. I believe probably that they threw that in as a sort of an Easter egg, with the idea at the time that probably Thanos would invade Asgard to get the Tesseract and use and get the gauntlet while it was there. If that's the case, obviously plans have changed. I have a very off-the-wall theory on how you could get around this. I'm not saying it even totally makes sense, but as a way to correct this seeming plot hole. And that is that sometime between the ancient ones that we saw in the sort of tutorial on Infinity Stones from the original Guardians movie, when they were able to collect them all together and then they were all separated again, someone else tried to collect the Infinity Stones and actually had some kind of gauntlet commissioned, created to hold them, and ultimately failed. And then later on, for whatever reason, Asgard found a fake gauntlet and put it in the vault. And while Thanos was devising his plan to get all of the Infinity Stones, he heard about this, that there was this gauntlet created, could not find it, but had a good enough idea of what it looked like to use it as his design that he commissioned the dwarves to make, which would explain why there was an old fake one in the Asgardian vault. Like I said, I'm not saying it even makes sense. I'm not sure I'm saying I like the idea. It's the one idea that I could come up with that would explain why there was a fake gauntlet in the vault. If you have another idea or a better idea, please let me know down in the comments below. But that's one of the only real major-ish plot hole that was developed because of this movie. So on Thanos' ship, as I alluded to before, Thanos uses Nebula to get the information of where the location of the Soul Stone is. Ultimately, she and Thanos go to this planet. They meet Red Skull, the character I did not expect to come back, but now at least people can stop asking what happened to Red Skull at the end of Captain America: The First Avenger. And it is revealed that to get the Soul Stone, he must sacrifice what he loves the most. And as an audience, we know, we know where this is going. And it takes some time for Gamora to figure it out. But the emotion on Thanos' face in this film, oh my God. I mean, I felt for Thanos. He is the guy that's trying to wipe out half of the universe. Has already killed several beloved characters. And I'm feeling emotion for him. That's when I knew this film was really, really, really working. Ultimately, he kills Gamora, takes the Soul Stone, and now he has another one and a couple more to go. And we have the big fight on Titan, where the rest of the Guardians meet up with Iron Man, Doctor Strange, and Spider-Man after a bit of mix-ups there. And Doctor Strange looks at 13-something million possible endings and only finds one that works. And I would assume that he is setting up that one path as best he can. Which is why when he ultimately gives the Time Stone to Thanos to save Tony's life, I wasn't like, oh my god, you ruined it all. And that's another reason why I can't be as upset as I would be otherwise with Peter for ruining it all when they just about had the gauntlet off of Thanos. When he finds out that Thanos killed Gamora and starts hitting him and knocks Mantis free, or knocks Mantis Voss, which frees Thanos from her mental powers. And that whole plan was so cool. But I can't be that upset with Peter because it's like, okay, this is all what had to happen. And I loved, again, Thanos' banter with Tony. Like, I know who you are. You're not the only one cursed with knowledge. And then, another one of my favorite lines, when this is over, half of humanity will still be alive. I hope they remember you. Then this is ultimately leading to the big battle in Wakanda. And I already talked about my issues with that. Thematically, my issues with it. Visually, it's really, really cool. It's so much fun. So many characters have their moments. Ultimately, the attempt to get the Mind Stone out of Vision fails. And with the arrival of Thanos finally at the end, they have Scarlet Witch is begged by Vision to do it. And he's like, I'm sorry that you're the only one that can do it, but you have to do it. And my God, in possibly the most brutal sequence in any MCU film, Scarlet Witch is forced to kill her boyfriend, watch him get revived with the Time Stone, and then brutally killed again as Thanos completes his set. And that whole fight was awesome. Cap actually stopping the gauntlet momentarily, and again you see on Thanos is like, alright, props. I mean, you just have that I did not see that happening. Also shows where they purposely lied in the trailers. I did not actually see the final trailer, which that scene is in. But if you go back and watch the final trailer, in that scene he only has 2 gems or 2 Infinity Stones in the gauntlet, which at that point he had all of them. And then the other thing where they lied was showing Hulk in the Wakandan battle when it was actually Bruce in the Hulkbuster, which was very funnily ironic. But Thor, having survived the heat of a dying star, gets his new Warhammer axe, and out of nowhere just throws the axe and buries it deep in Thanos' chest. And I mean, it definitely hurt Thanos. And he's like, you should have aimed for my head. Personally, I would have aimed for the wrist, tink. But unfortunately, he went for the breastbone, and Thanos is able to snap his fingers. And my God, some people just went out. Like Black Panther, Bucky just gone. Scarlet Witch, I mean, she's already just broken over what happened to Vision, but then we see Groot go. We go back to Titan, and we see the various other Guardians go. We see Doctor Strange, and he says to Tony, "This is the only way." And that's where I feel like this is the only path that he saw to the end victory. Because as he said, we're in the end game now. And then Spider-Man, my God, that was brutal. Holy crap. And I have read that all of the lines that Spider-Man says in that scene were ad-libbed by Tom Holland. And if that is the case, wow, it might be some of the best ad-libbing of the entire series, at least from a dramatic standpoint. But yeah, that's the end. Thanos wins and goes, as he said earlier, to watch a sunrise on a grateful universe. And And interestingly enough, for the most part, those that are still alive amongst our heroes are our core originals: Captain, Iron Man, Thor, Black Widow, the Hulk, or at least Bruce Banner, and presumably Hawkeye is still out there. His absence was explained because, like Ant-Man, they have families and took deals to protect their families. We know we're going to be getting the Ant-Man and Wasp movie later this summer. I have a sinking suspicion that whatever end credit sequence we get is going to involve some manner of their families disappearing in all of this, which would lead to them joining up in Avengers 4. I'd be very surprised if they were not included. Of course, we also get the end credit sequence here where we see Maria Hill and Nick Fury, and he is trying to send an old school page to something that has a logo that looks much like Captain Marvel, which is a obvious tease to next March's release of Captain Marvel. And we'll most likely be seeing her in Avengers 4 as well. Wow, yeah. So basically, as far as the deaths go, we can split these into those that happened before the finger snap and everything that happened after. Loki is dead. I think this is the end of Loki. I don't see him coming back. He's had too many fake out deaths, as Thor said later in the movie. I think it's real this time. Heimdall, unfortunately, I think is dead as well. I mean, there's basically no Asgardian characters left at this point. So I'm curious if we're ever going to get a Thor 4, if Thor even survives Avengers 4, what would happen there. Gamora, of course, I think of all of the deaths, possibly I could see her potentially coming back through this. We don't know what exactly happens with the Soul Stone when you sacrifice a soul to get the Soul Stone. One potential angle is that somehow Thanos decides that the price was too high and tries to reverse it on himself. I don't really see that happening. I'd be surprised if Gamora stays dead. I think she's, of all the characters who died, I think she has the most potential to come back, especially in future Guardians of the Galaxy's movies, since really Spider-Man Homecoming 2, whatever they end up calling it, and Guardians of the Galaxy 3 are technically the only films green-lighted after Avengers 4. But I can also see, because that was such an emotionally pivotal moment in this film, that they're going to make her death permanent. I would be sad, but I would also respect the MCU for not having another death fake out. And then, of course, we have Vision, and his death happening so close to the finger snap, depending on how they reverse it. If they use the time stone to reverse it, that's potentially where I could see them reviving Vision. But other than his connection to Scarlet Witch, he's probably the most disposable, at least compared to like Gamora as how she fits into the Guardians of the Galaxy. But I really just don't know. And then, of course, we have everyone that dies after the finger snap. I do think the finger snap is going to get reversed in some fashion. Like I said, of course, one way is that they have Thanos undo it. Another way is that they use the time stone to do it. I don't think that's the case. I think they made... There's so much damage on the gauntlet and Thanos' arm to show just how powerful and how much it took out of him and the gauntlet and the stones to wipe out half of the universe. Now, that could just be to show, hey, this really was like, oh, he can't just like remake the universe from scratch because he has all the Infinity Stones. There is a finite amount of power, even though they are known as the Infinity Stones. But that leads me to some of my suppositions. And this is not from the comic books. I have not read the comic books, and I really don't want to know anything from the comic books. So try to avoid any spoilers that might be... this is how it happened in the comic books. I really don't want to know. I'm watching these as movies. But But as far as the movies go, I see that if they're able to get the gauntlet away from Thanos, I can see this going one of several ways. The first is that someone's going to have to put the gauntlet on, do the finger snap themselves, and because of the amount of power that is unleashed, it is going to kill them. I can see this happening to either Captain America or Iron Man because the supposition is that one of them is not going to make it through this film when both of them made it through Civil War. It could be a good send out for Cap. Of the two, I would lean towards Iron Man. Again, going back to the idea of the setup that they were setting him up as the one that might die. And I don't know if they would do the full fake out again like they did with Hawkeye in Age of Ultron. But ultimately, what happens in this theory is that Peter is the surrogate son, the surrogate child. He wants to bring back Pepper possibly if she is gone. Potentially she is pregnant. We don't know. But he has to put the gauntlet on and finger snap and send and die to bring back the rest of the world. The other idea is that gauntlet is so big, the only character that could potentially actually really wear it would be Hulk. And that might be why they're keeping the Hulk away. And so he has to come back at that pivotal moment and put the glove on, finger snap, and potentially kill the Hulk. And I could see where it would actually leave Bruce without the Hulk. Because I could see that being one of the only things that would actually potentially kill the Hulk. We've seen that Thanos is more powerful than the Hulk, so I could see where he could survive the finger snap where the Hulk might not. And depending on how much they're trying to retire the originals after Avengers 4, which is something that they've talked about, I could see where a Hulkless Bruce Banner then finally can have his moment of happiness with Natasha. And that wouldn't necessarily mean that she'd have to retire either. She could still be the Black Widow, and Bruce just be the really smart genius at home. So those are just some of my theories moving forward. Beyond that, I really don't know. Like I said, the ending totally surprised me. I was not expecting the hard cliffhanger ending. I was like, oh my god, we never got to see the reunion of Cap and Iron Man. Obviously, that's going to happen at some point in time in Avengers 4. There's too few heroes left. And speaking of Iron Man, he and Nebula are the only two that are left on Titan, so they're going to have to figure out some way to get home. I know Nebula crashed her ship into Thanos, but it didn't look like it took that much damage on impact. So that's a potential way for them to get off. There might be other ships there on Titan. I would imagine they're going to come back to Earth and regroup and figure out what they're going to do. Because I would imagine Nebula at this point is the most knowledgeable on Thanos that we have left. Really, even taking into account Thor, Nebula knows more about Thanos than anyone. First, they got to figure out where this whole cottage is and figure out a plan. But it was so. I was just as I'm getting into it, is they're just there were certain combinations that I wanted to see and I didn't get to see. So I don't know if all of Avengers 4 will be with just the people we have left, or if they're going to be able to reverse it and still have to finish off Thanos. I don't know. I mean, basically everything I predicted for Infinity War was wrong. Other than the fact that I loved it, I was very hopeful that I was going to love this movie. I did. It's great. I think I have talked way too long about this movie, so I'm going to turn it over to you now. If you have seen Avengers Infinity War, which I hope, because I've pretty much talked about the entire movie, I've spoiled everything. What did you think about it? What were your favorite moments? What were your least favorite moments? I mean, and I really would like specifically your thoughts on my issue with the We Don't Trade Lives storyline, as well as any ideas for potential ideas for the plot hole of the fake Infinity Gauntlet, and then any of your ideas for what we might see in Avengers 4, again, not including what you might know from the comics. So thank you for sitting through this very long video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe to my channel. You can click the little bell button to get notifications of new videos. I do movie reviews. I do in-depth movie reviews when the need arises. I do TV reviews, do some trailer reactions, do lists and other things. I just love talking about movies. I've been talking about movies for over a decade now, and I'm going to continue doing it. I hope you enjoy. So, As always, I'll see you at the movies.